Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Divorce Unplugged podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Nicole Cox. You might know me as the Family Law Liaison. And today we are going to talk about mediation.
Hey everybody, I'm Keegan Burke. You may recognize me as Divorceology on all the socials. My disclosure, I'm not an attorney, not giving legal advice, not lawyering, none of those things. Just a coach who understands the system and is here to talk about it.
There you go. Nice job, Keegan. And I myself, I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. And right now we are not giving legal advice. And I do coach through custody and divorce.
So let's get this thing kicked off. I know that this is a hot topic, one that most people experience if they're in divorce or custody, in any kind and in every state. But I'll kick it over to you with the first question on it, though, is
Okay.
why do we mediate?
Well, I mean, I think it's twofold. One, you mediate because the biggest issue is so that you can save money, and so that you can try to do it peacefully, and not go into court.
Yeah, I think that's in a perfect world, you're able to negotiate all of the terms of your separation, all of the terms of your parenting time, and you're working together, especially if you have kids. I think that also one that people probably don't recognize is that it does, in a lot of cases, keep the decision making in your hands, right? You're not giving the decisions to somebody else.
You're not handing them over to a judge, to an evaluator.
Yep.
Right.
And there are, so we're clear, there are a couple different kinds of mediation, right?
There are, correct. It's interesting, and I learned this recently. There are mediations where you are in a reporting county, and then there's a mediation where it's a non-reporting county. And the way I usually look at that is it's like you can choose to mediate or on your own and find somebody private who's usually an ex-judge or someone like that, or an attorney, or the courts make you mediate.
Yeah.
And that would be a reporting county.
Yeah. So California, for instance, if you file what we call an RFO, request for order, and it includes custody, there's a required mediation. Now, that requirement does not mean you have to go in and come out with an agreement. It just means they're going to force you through the process of having a conversation. And to your point, even in California, there are some counties that are not reporting but have a required mediation step, and other counties that are. And let me tell you, if you
That gets confusing.
Yeah.
You got to figure out where you're at.
100%, because if you screw this up and you walk into a mediation appointment not thinking it's confidential and coming out that it's a reporting, or you go into it not realizing it's a reporting mediation appointment, you could be in for a rude awakening, because whatever comes out of that mediation, the person running the mediation is going to provide a report, an opinion, and a recommendation for the judge that, if it's not in your favor, is a whole different bag of worms that you're trying to deal with, because you got to overcome something that may not be in your favor right from the jump.
Do you know that I've actually seen mediations happen in certain counties in California, which, again, very confusing on which county and what they do. They will a mediator will go straight into and in front of the judge with a recommendation. And sometimes the judge will say, okay, with your recommendation, now this is going to be part of the order. I mean, I had a client who lost 2 nonverbal autistic kiddos because she wasn't prepared for her mediation, and her attorney didn't have the proper paperwork in, so the mediator only got one side of the story, ran right in front of the judge, and it became an order, and she had to give up 100% of her custody at that time.
That's tough. And I just had somebody who went into a mediation appointment and didn't realize it was a reporting county. Thought he was, more charismatic and more intelligent and more capable than probably he was, and or was less considerate of the impact of the mediator on the heels of the mediation, and is now going to have to run uphill with no shoes on and in the snow.
That's pretty funny. That's a funny analogy. Also, I do think it's important to note that the mediators, if they don't like you, you have to make sure that you're kind, courteous, and don't blame the other person all the time. And those are some things we can discuss. But if the mediator doesn't like you, that's a problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also think let's talk about the forced mediation scenarios or where it's doesn't cost any money, it's part of your process, right? And then we'll get into the private side where there it's a totally different approach, right? And this kind of
Totally
comes
different
back to what
animal.
we're always saying. You have to have a coach. You have to have
Oh,
a
yeah. You
strategy,
have to have a coach.
have to be prepared, have to know what you're willing to give up, what you are wanting, and where the line in the sand is deep and uncrossable, and that's the hill you're going to die on. But in
Right?
those mediation appointments where it's a part of the process, a requirement, y-
That's
those
different. You don't
those are
have the
different.
BATNA. You don't have your line in the sand. It's a way different situation. It's almost more like being in another court proceeding.
Yeah, it is. And I think through the lens of, I want to try. I'm a huge advocate for mediation, by the way. I'll go on record and say that
I
I
am
think
too.
if you can negotiate and mediate in on all topics, you should. Right? That's what most logical, reasonable people should come to the conclusion of. Because at some point, everybody lays down their weapons. It might be 10, 12, 15, 20 years down the road, in my case, 12 plus years, but at some point, the weapons will be laid down. And so, if you could have done that earlier, you could have saved a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy, a lot of peace of mind. But that being said, mediation is like playing poker, right? You're going to want to make the right
Mhm.
moves along the way. You don't have to walk out with an agreement, but there
No,
are things you want to avoid. I'll give you an example. You don't necessarily want to overshare if it's part of the process and you know where you stand with what you're not willing to give up or you are
right.
willing to give, but you're not going to get to an agreement, why would you show the people you're
Your cards,
playing your
your
cards?
cards.
Yeah.
This is funny. I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but I used to do divorce mediation, but it was not in a reporting county. So it was just people that wanted to mediate. Different
Mhm.
scenario, but I've seen some interesting situations. So know that your mediator isn't your therapist.
That's right. Ooh, that's a good one.
Your mediator is not your therapist. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people make that mistake too. They because mediators are mostly nice, right? You can very easily overshare. You think you're convincing them. You think that, you're it's not a place to make your argument
No.
ultimately, as far as I'm concerned. It is a place to try to find middle ground. And I think it's a really good thing to do. I think it's well worth the time. And in some cases, where we were going to get into it, is the private mediation. In some cases, it's worth your money.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So, in your mind, is it better to mediate early, mid, or late?
This is an interesting question, and we talked about it a little bit a minute ago. For me, with my clients, when I'm coaching, and you absolutely need a coach to go to mediation, um, in my mind, there's a couple different places to do it, but it's strategic, right? It's maybe not in the very beginning, and it depends on if you're a very high conflict case or not.
Mhm.
Also, I think some moments to mediate are after you get an evaluation. Now, you may be the one that got the really good, recommendation on the custody evaluation, or you may not have gotten such a great recommendation. And so I think attorneys and personally myself, I use that as okay, maybe it's time for us to go mediate. Maybe we mediate before we get in front of the judge and you get hammered. Or maybe we mediate because you won. It looks like you're doing pretty well in this area because we're talking basically about custody. Um, and that's a strategic time to mediate. Or you mediate finances, you mediate, child support and alimony, some spousal support before you have to go into court because you already know what everybody's finances look like and you kind of agree. I think a good time to mediate also is when you're pretty close to getting to an agreement, but you're not quite there. And also, everybody can keep into consideration you can mediate several different issues and only find one that you agree on. And then that issue has been extinguished, turns into part of the court order, and then you don't have to take that one to trial.
Yeah, I think that's a really big one that people miss is that, even if it's, agreeing that the sky is blue, find small topics that are sensible, aren't going to waste the court's time. Because here's the other thing, too. When you leave mediation and you don't have an agreement, you're going to end up in a courtroom and you only have so much court attention, right? So, like, there's
Mhm.
only so many
So
things that you're gonna be able to
that's a huge
put in
point.
front of them.
That's
So,
a huge point.
don't
Yes.
waste your, like, limited opportunity arguing something you could have really
Right.
easily agreed to in mediation. And
That is
by the way, that includes hallway negotiations, right? Let's like the informal mediation where the judge
right.
goes, "Go in the hall, figure it out." Or you and counsel and their counsel and everybody's just talking about what can we get off the calendar right
Or
now.
how about emails? Attorneys can email each other back and forth on small things, and you can stipulate on that quite quickly, you know?
Well,
Yes.
yes, hopefully, because if they don't, it's an expensive letter writing contest.
Yeah, that's $500 each way, every
Yeah,
way.
yeah, exactly.
That's true.
Hopefully it's their paralegal sending it and it's, half
Yeah,
the rate.
maybe
Uh,
the associate.
yeah. The other thing too that I think if you're in a high conflict situation or a very contentious situation, when you walk into mediation, have a realistic expectation of what's going to happen. Don't
Mhm.
be over hopeful. Don't be willing to give away the farm.
No.
Again, these are all things that we work through with our folks with preparation, right? It's like
Mhm.
this is a very important part of the process. It's sort of like chess. You may
It
be
is.
making a
It
move
is.
well
Yes.
in advance. You may
Yeah.
be trying to recover from a bad move.
Mhm.
And it may just be an information fact finding because by the way, the other side may not be as prepared as you and may overshare themselves. So it's a really good opportunity. I think that the general notion should be you're going in with an open and true and honest intent to negotiate, but being considerate of who you're dealing with and what's before you so that you aren't making missteps.
And also so that you're not feeling pushed to agree on something that you don't really feel comfortable with.
Totally. That also takes me to verbal agreement in mediation. Be
Oh,
very
yeah.
cautious to verbally agree to anything that
Right.
you may not have agreed to because a mediator can, in a reporting county,
I was gonna say,
um,
especially reporting county.
write it down, put it in their report, and then
Mhm.
if you try to argue, well, I didn't agree because there's no written stipulation, the court's going to say, but you agreed to it, just wasn't written down.
Oh, yeah, that would be
So
bad.
I've seen that, and it's oof, if you don't know that going in, again,
That's a great piece of advice, thank you, and I'm gonna actually share that with my clients.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's a big one. All right, so let's talk a little bit about private mediation because I'm
Right,
also an advocate for that. I wish more people did it.
right.
Uh, Again, it's one of those things, though, right? Picking your mediator's a tough part of the process, getting both sides to agree to it,
Mhm.
understanding your case, right? We were talking about this a little bit ago. Who's on the other side and is it worth it?
Right. Yeah, exactly, and to speak to that, if you know for a fact so if it's not court ordered and you're thinking, "Well, this might be a good idea," but you know for a fact that your other co-parent or partner on the other side isn't going to agree to anything, then it's almost like, why do it? Because it is quite an expense.
100%, right? You have to have, if you're a salesperson, a sight to sale, right? Like you have to see the finish line and go, I know I can get there somehow. And if you don't have that, then don't waste the money, whether it's split, whether it's fronted, any of those things. You're just going to have to figure out how to go battle it out.
Well, and just to let our viewers, our audience know, you can go into private mediation and come out spending $20,000 and have not anything agreed upon.
Exactly right.
And you sit there for 8 hours, they wear you down, it's a process. And so in most private mediations that I've seen, not the ones that I did in the past, but now, and especially if it's high conflict, they'll put you in different rooms. So you go and you caucus in different rooms back and forth, and the mediator comes back and forth. And it's a long process, and it's very costly if you have no intention of, settling.
Yeah, exactly right. And I don't think there's much more to say other than if there's no sight to sail,
Right.
don't play the game.
Don't get
Right.
in it.
And so, in your mind, is it better to go with private mediation or like a court appointed mediator or a court connected mediator? Or is it case by case?
Oh, so I would just always be against a court connected mediator. So yeah, I mean, I just think that if you're going to choose a mediator, it shouldn't be connected to the courts and it shouldn't be court appointed unless, and if it is court appointed, then, you need to really prepare yourself and be careful,
Yeah.
right? And you need a coach. You need a coach regardless of whether it is court appointed or not, because you have to have all your ducks in order, know exactly what you're willing to take, what you're not going to do, and what the middle of the road is for you. Because that's really what mediation is kind of taking the middle of the road.
Yeah, 100%. I think that you would be insane to try to go into mediation without being completely prepared. I think that people have a very difficult time getting completely prepared without a coach.
Oh,
But nevertheless, you have to know exactly where you are and what you're trying to do, or you're walking into the lion's den and that's it. Right?
blind.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep.
Oh, we can talk about some of our other considerations, or just to know that mediation agreements are binding. So once you sign that, that is going to be filed and it is going to turn into a court order.
Yes, gotta know that. Um, and the only way really to unwind those is, a clear showing of coercion or fraud.
Right.
And those bars are pretty high,
That's hard to show.
especially in family law.
Right. I mean,
Just
unless
because
you can show that you were under the influence, like,
right.
you know, completely not capable of contracting, then it's very hard to get out of a mediation agreement.
Yep. Yep. And then I think the other thing too around mediation is from a general kind of prioritization perspective when it comes to planning and thinking about, well, where do you try to focus your attention in terms of agreement? And we talked a little bit about it in our economics conversation, but let's just use the example of, let's talk finance, where we're going to argue about an asset, right? And if you're in a court appointed mediation or even a paid mediation, at the end of the day, the asset's there and you can either agree without a cost or agree with a
Yeah.
cost, but don't disagree to the extent that it's going to cost as much about the disagreement as it is about the asset.
Because then you're going to end up with nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
People do it all the time.
Well, out of
Um,
spite.
yeah, exactly. We're going to fight to fight and we're going to burn the boats. And I don't care what it costs me and I don't care what I have left. I think it's a terrible perspective,
Boats.
but it happens all the time. Right.
Yeah.
The other one too is understanding, who you're dealing with on the other side. And what I mean by that is we don't like this, but there are personality disorders. There are
Mhm.
abusive folks. There are manipulative folks. It is an oppositional game, even though it's mediation, right?
Right.
So
Well, Yeah, absolutely. I think another point to make on mediation is that everybody needs to be aware of what they can bring in.
Mhm.
Because and in some states like Arizona, before you go into mediation, you can send in a whole like folder full of information so that that mediator has background on the whole case and they can go into and look. And I always tell even my clients in California, take in your paperwork to show the mediator that this is really what you're doing and what's going on, and have your documentation in order for mediation.
100%. Have to be completely prepared. Have to be. So, final thoughts. What
Mhm.
do you think is best and worst about mediation?
Well, so the best thing about mediation is that you can save money, do it without high conflict. You don't have to face a judge. A judge isn't making a decision for you. You're actually kind of making a decision with the person that you're parting away from. So that's best. And then I think some of the worst parts about mediation would go with the reporting counties, where people are not aware that when they go in to that mediation, it's not a safe place. That I think is misleading.
Yeah, I like all of those points. I would agree with all of them. The best is certainly in my mind, you're to some level in control. Um, but I think part of that control is understanding, again, back to coaching and preparation and understanding your case. Um, what is worth negotiating? Because remember, if you leave that mediation, no matter what form, and there's an argument to be had and you end up in a courtroom,
Yeah,
it's an arbitration, it's a fight, right? And most courtrooms are going to leave you unsatisfied with the outcome.
right.
So
Even more unsatisfied than you might be in mediation.
exactly. So be
Yeah,
willing to give, right? Like my point is like be willing to give up some things, recognizing that you are going to have to do that even if you fought it out anyway. So,
right.
what can you give up least? And think through the lens of yourself, but also as both parties, right? Think about what the outcome needs to be.
Well, you just made a good point, which is basic negotiation. What is it that you can give up that's the least important to you? And then the other person's thinking, what can I give up that's the least important to me? And then somehow you get a little closer in the middle.
We can't give them all the secrets during a podcast, you know.
I know. It's just basic negotiation, guys.
Yeah, right. Well, I would say this. This is a very important topic, and everybody needs to understand it. So, obviously, feel free to reach out, but like, listen, subscribe.
Definitely.
We appreciate everybody who's been here. We appreciate all the questions we get. And I'm sure we'll cover mediation again, and maybe even in some capacity, stories of folks who have been through it and experienced some of the things we're talking about directly.
I know. I would love to bring on some guests. So if anybody, wants to give us a shout out and come on and talk about their mediation experiences, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Until next time.
Until next time. See you soon.